السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا وارزقنا إخلاصا في القول والعمل. آمين يا رب العالمين. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all the blessings that He has given us. We thank Him that He has granted us the opportunity and the ability to be gathered here in the masjid tonight, inshallah, to learn about His prophets that He mentions in the Quran. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He allow us to learn what is beneficial, that He allow us to benefit from whatever we learn, that He allow anything that we hear, inshallah, to have a positive influence, impact on our lives. Ameen. Continue on with the story of the Prophet Yusuf, alayhi salatu wasalam. I just want to quickly recap what we took about the Prophet Yaqub last week and the beginning of the story of the Prophet Yusuf. So this will be a very, very quick recap of what we took last week. So the Prophet Yaqub, we mentioned that from his names is Israel. He is the son of the Prophet Ishaq, who is the son of the Prophet Ibrahim, which would make Yaqub the grandson of the Prophet Ibrahim. And that makes him as well the father of the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. So very noble lineage. We put up our hadith here that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said he is the honorable, the son of the honorable, the son of the honorable, the son of the honorable. Meaning Yusuf, the son of Yaqub, the son of Ishaq, the son of Ibrahim, all honorable prophets. Um, we mentioned that the Prophet Yaqub had 12 children, 10 of them belonging to one of his spouses, and two of them belonging to another one of his spouse. So 10 of them belonged to one spouse, and Yusuf and his brother Binyamin belonged to or was from the other spouse, I should say. But they were still brothers, you would say, half brothers, albeit, but they are brothers at the end of the day. So we mentioned how the Prophet Yusuf, alayhi salatu wasalam, because the Prophet Yaqub, who was a prophet, knew that Allah would choose the Prophet Yusuf as well as a noble prophet. Obviously, he gave him a different type of attention, right? In terms of teaching him, in terms of imparting certain prophetic wisdoms onto him. So without a doubt, he used to spend some more time with the Prophet Yusuf to teach him the ways of prophethood. That slowly started creating jealousy in the hearts of his brothers. The Prophet Yusuf saw the very famous dream that I saw the 11 stars and the sun and the moon. I saw them prostrating to me. The Prophet Yaqub told Yusuf, do not tell your brothers about this because indeed they will plot against you. Regardless, their brothers came together and they plotted anyways because of shaitan. So at first they wanted to kill him, and then eventually, after discussion, one of them said, let's just throw him in a well, and some people will take him, and we will be free from him, and our father will give his sole attention to us. So they convinced his father after much, much, much convincing, much trying. His father did not, because he did not trust his sons. But eventually he was convinced by the will of Allah, and the Prophet Yusuf was taken by his brothers. He was thrown into the well. The brothers, they come back to the father. They came fake crying, saying that our brother was eaten by a wolf and we were out busy racing and so on and so forth. The Prophet Yusuf said that he suspected something in them, and he said that I only have patience in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the meantime, the Prophet Yusuf is inside the well. Caravan comes up, they discover him, they take him, and they sell him. They sell him to a very famous or very influential person in the city. And the person tells his wife that we will raise him. Perhaps he'll be a servant to us, or the very least, if we really like him, we'll take him as a son, and the very least, he'll be our servant. So the Prophet Yusuf grows up in this household. Many years pass by. He now becomes a young man, and that's where the next test is shown to the Prophet Yusuf, alayhi salatu wasalam, the test of temptation. And this is when the wife of his master, you can say, sought to seduce him. To cut the story short, basically, she tried, but then the husband came into the door and saw the situation, and basically realized and was discovered that it was his wife that was behind this. It wasn't Yusuf. However, he told Yusuf, ignore it, act like it never happened. Let's just move on. However, the wife, she could not move on because she heard the rumors from the other woman around the city. They said, such a noble woman, she is trying to seduce her servant boy. Like, what is this? This is not befitting. So to try and show her why she did what she did, and perhaps another attempt at seducing him, she brought all the women together and she prepared a feast for them, a banquet for them. And of course, they were given knives to eat. So as they're cutting, she commands her servant, the Prophet Yusuf, to come out. He steps out in front of them, and because of his beauty, the level of handsomeness, they, in the midst of their cutting, they were in awe, and they see Yusuf and they lose track of what they're cutting and they cut their hands. And they said that this must be a noble angel, it cannot be a human. So the wife says, this is why I did what I did. Do you not understand now? And then she tried a second time that if he doesn't listen to what I tell him, if he doesn't follow my commands, I will throw him into prison. The Prophet Yusuf والسلام, stayed steadfast and he made dua to Allah, oh Allah, protect me from them. I would rather go to prison for your sake. Eventually, the husband comes back despite both of them knowing that Yusuf والسلام, was not at fault, it was the wife. We mentioned that they framed Yusuf, they made him look like he was out to seduce the noble woman. And perhaps the man, especially the man, he was too concerned, as the scholars say, of his reputation, right? He didn't want people to know that it was my wife that tried to seduce our servant boy. And because of this, they framed Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam and they threw him in prison. Of course, he had no case, he's a servant boy. This is where we left off, and this is where we will continue from. We mentioned that one of the beauties of the story of Yusuf that makes it very much different from the other stories is that the story literally goes in order from the beginning of the surah until the end. So much of this surah is almost like a tafsir of sort. We're just going through verse by verse, or also the verses of the surah. I've tried to compile the translation up on the screen, and we can kind of read it, and I'll kind of give an explanation of it. So the Prophet Yusuf, when he is thrown into the prison, when he is put into the prison, as he's put into the prison, two other men were also put into prison with him for their own cases, for their own trials. When they were in prison, we can assume that after some time they began to trust the Prophet Yusuf. Because the Prophet Yusuf at the end of the day is a prophet of Allah. And perhaps the way he spoke, the way he conducted himself, we can say that the way he also worshipped Allah, all of this combined made these two fellow prisoners trust the Prophet Yusuf. So what did they say? They both saw a dream. They both saw a dream, and the dreams are mentioned in the Quran. One of them said that I saw myself in a dream, I'm pressing grapes for wine. I'm pressing grapes for wine. I'm making wine. The other said, I see myself that I'm walking around and I have bread on my head, and birds are coming and eating the bread from my head. So they both came to him and they said, this dream is confounding us. We need an interpretation for it. We trust you. Can you interpret it for us? So the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, as he is a prophet, he said that I will inform you about the dream. You're not going to receive food today before I interpret it for you, meaning that don't worry, before your next meal comes, I'll interpret it for you. However, he doesn't interpret it for them right away. The first thing he does is that he first calls them to the way of Allah. He reminds them that I have left the religion of those who do not believe in Allah, who disbelieve in the hereafter. I'm following the way of Ibrahim and Ishaq, and he pleads to them, he reminds them, are multiple gods better than one God? Shouldn't you worship one God alone? And subhanAllah, he has a mission in point because as we see the interpretation of the dream, one of the men will be executed, right? So his goal here is not to only give them da'wah for the sake of da'wah, but the other man will be executed. Perhaps I can call him to the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever crimes he may have committed, because of those crimes he was in jail, perhaps if he turns to Allah, if he accepts Allah, and he repents towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sincerely alone, then even if he's executed, at least he has accepted Islam, at least he has sought repentance. Whatever punishment that he deserves in this dunya, he will get it, but in the akhirah, he will be saved. So this is the vision of the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, and that is what he does. He first calls them towards Allah, and we have no reason to say that they rejected, because that's not mentioned in the Quran. In fact, in the Quran is mentioned that they were soft towards him, and they appreciated him. So we have reason to suspect that they actually accepted his da'wah. So after he calls them towards Allah, he begins to interpret their dreams. What is the interpretation? He says, "My fellow prisoners, one of you, the one who saw in his dream that I am pressing wine, I'm making wine," he says, "you will serve wine to your master," meaning the king. You will be released from prison, and for whatever reason, you will be eventually taken up to the court of the king, and you will be a servant for the king. And as for the other, he will be executed. And specifically, he'll be crucified, and birds will eat from his head. Obviously, that was a way of their execution back then, crucifixion, and they used to leave the body out there as a lesson for everyone else for whatever crime he committed. We don't know the exact crime he committed. It's not mentioned to us. It must have been something terrible for him to be crucified. So obviously, if the body is going to be left out there hanging, the birds will come eat from his head. So he said basically, you will be executed and you will be crucified, and the birds will eat from your head. The matter about which you inquired has been decided, which means that it took place as he has said. One of the men were taken out and was executed, and we hope that he accepted the message. We have reason to believe he accepted the message, so inshallah he's in paradise. The other one who went free, Yusuf tells him, "Then make sure you mention my name to the king," right? I need to get out of prison, right? So mention my name to the king. Give him a good word. Say, "I'm a good prisoner. I'm a good person. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't commit anything wrong in prison. Give a testimony for my character. Speak good of me to the king so he can look into my case. If he can then look into my case, then I have a chance of getting out." However, when the guy went free, forget about Yusuf. He's just happy about his freedom, and shaitan causes him to forget, right? He's extremely happy. He's free. Not only is he free, he is now a servant for the king, perhaps one of the most noble positions that he can possibly have. So he totally forgot about the Prophet Yusuf. And Allah says, فَلَبِثَ فِي السِّجْنِ بِضْعَ سِنِينَ. He remained in prison for several years. So we don't know how many years. So he's already been in prison, and now several years goes by. How exactly? The scholars say bid'ah refers to any number between 3 and 10. So it could be anywhere, 3 and 9. So it could be anywhere between that number, 3 and 9, perhaps 7, 8, 9, Allahu A'lam. He stayed in prison for a good number of years. Okay, so now the man that went free is with the king. He serves, yeah.
Quick question, and more of like analysis, like trying to understand. So before going to prison, Yusuf alayhi salam prayed to Allah that prison will be better for me.
Yeah.
Here is asking the man
Yeah.
to tell the king. Is
Yeah.
there any sort of
Contradiction?
Yeah, like meaning Allah maybe like when we teach you, like you asked me to put you in there, ask me to take it out. Is there any such? I think I heard some analogy like that, but I'm just trying to.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So, yeah, what the brother is saying, that perhaps a lesson for Yusuf was that he asked Allah to put him in prison, I guess, but he didn't ask Allah directly that take me out of prison. He asked the man, tell the king. So because of that, Allah is teaching him a lesson that perhaps he should have asked Allah. That's an interesting insight. Maybe Allahu A'lam. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Maybe perhaps he could have directly made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, "Oh Allah, take me out of prison." But at the same time, it's hard to kind of say that against the Prophet that he didn't make dua. So
I was saying like
yeah, it's an interesting thought. It's an interesting thought. But I don't want to say that against a prophet. However, it shows that he was willing to go to prison for the sake of Allah. However, he realized the prison isn't the end goal. He still needs to find his way out, right? So it's not like, okay, Allah threw me in prison, I'm just going to live in prison for the rest of my life. No, I have to figure out a way out. So he saw this as an opportunity, and he asked him. But that's an interesting thought. Yeah.
So to further to this, when we read the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, we see like a lot of use of strategy. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, there's asking.
Yes, a lot of use of strategy.
So I mean, and when we see the other nabis, obviously we don't know as much, but like there's
A use
very
of
clear
strategy.
recommendation
Yeah.
of using strategy because
Yeah.
That is like something.
Correct. So that is true tawakkul, that you first do whatever you can in your control. You create a plan, you follow through with your plan, you take the necessary steps, and then you rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we can assume that he saw this as an opportunity. He asked the man, and we can assume that he also made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, given that he is a prophet, right? I think that would be the safer thing, right? Um, so now the man that went free is with the king. He's serving the king in the king's court. So now the king sees a very interesting dream that clearly has been bothering him. He says, I have seen 7 fat cows being eaten by 7 lean ones, 7 skinny cows. So 7 skinny cows coming and eating 7 fat or large cows. And I've seen 7 ears of grain, which are green, right, which are ready to be harvested. And I've seen 7 which are dry, right? They're not green. They don't look like they can be harvested and consumed. So, oh people, tell me about my dream if you can interpret dreams. He's telling his court. He wants someone to help him out here. Clearly, this is something that is bothering him. So, what did the court reply to him, his advisors? That adghathu ahlam, these are confused visions, right? These are delusions. Like you're just seeing random things. People see funny dreams all the time. And we do not know interpretations of such dreams. We don't know. We can't say. Now, this man, he's not necessarily an advisor. He's out there serving the king. So we can assume, now you can get an image that he's talking to his court, and this man is serving the king. As he's serving food to the king or wine to the king, he hears this and he pipes up. He says that the one who was freed and remembered after a time, that's what Allah says. At that moment, he finally remembered Yusuf, because I had a dream and Yusuf interpreted that dream and that dream came true. So all of a sudden, he's like, wait, I know someone that can interpret dreams. So what does he say? I will inform you of its interpretation, so send me forth. So now, interestingly, he doesn't say that. He mentions send me forth, and the scholars say that allow me to go to prison and speak to a person that can interpret for you. So he's not saying that I'm interpreting from myself. He's saying I can come to you with an interpretation. Is let me go out and let me seek the person that can interpret the dream for you. Okay. So the king, of course, agrees. Sorry, I'm going backwards. Yeah, so he then goes to prison and he finds Yusuf. And he basically says, Yusuf, oh truthful one, I need your help. Right? Now, subhanAllah, in that moment, Yusuf could respond in 2 ways. One is that you're coming to me for help. Basically, why would I help you? I asked you to remember me, and you didn't remember me. So now you're coming me for help. However, the Prophet Yusuf also sees in this an opportunity. Opportunity number 2, that I could interpret a dream for the king, and perhaps this will now be my way out. So perhaps we don't know. I'm just reading into it. Perhaps the emotion could be that I don't want to help you. Why would I help you? You totally forgot about me. However, his judgment, his wisdom overshadows his emotions. And that's a reminder for us that we don't want to act upon emotions all the time. We don't want to speak on our emotions. We want to be calm, always analyze the situation, try to think a couple of steps ahead, and then say what we have to say. But if we speak out of emotion, right, if we speak about how we're feeling, then sometimes we may ruin situations, ruin opportunities, ruin relationships. So perhaps in this situation, just reading into it, perhaps he could have been upset, but he kept his emotions in check and he interpreted the dream anyways. Why? He wants to come out of prison. And not only does he want to come out, he wants to also clear his name, as we'll see. So what does he say in this dream? He basically says, you will plant for 7 years consecutively. And what you harvest, leave in its spikes, except a little from what you eat. What does this mean? It means that basically, let's go back to the dream. The dream was 7 fat cows and 7 lean cows. The lean cows are eating the fat cows. You have these 7 good ears of grain, and you have the 7 dry ones. Basically, the 7 good, whether it's the cow or the grains, resemble the fact that they're eaten by the skinny cow shows that there will be 7 years of drought that will completely eat up what you have harvested, right? So the fact that the lean cow represents drought. The fat cow represents what you have, right? So the fact that the lean cow is eating the fat cow, it's a representation that the drought will come up and basically wipe out everything that you have. So you need to prepare for that. Likewise, the seven good grains represent the good years, and the dry ones represent what will come of the grains during the time of drought. So basically, you have to prepare for that. So the fat cow and the seven good grains of corn represent the good that you have, that you need to store, that you need to keep. And the lean cow eating, the fat cow, represents a drought that will come up and wipe out everything. And the dry grains represent what will come from the drought, right? If you don't prepare, so you need to prepare for it. So what does Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam do? He then tells them a plan forward, what you should do. So he said, you will plant, or perhaps a better translation would be, you should plant for 7 years consecutively, meaning for the next 7 years, continue to plant, continue to farm as you would usually do, and whatever you harvest, leave in its spikes, meaning that don't completely open it up. When you harvest it, leave it in the grains, because if you take it out of the grains, like corn, right? If you take corn out of the grain, what happens to corn? You have to eat it, you have to consume it, you cannot store it anymore. But if you want to store it, you leave it in the grains or in the spikes, as they call it. So whatever you harvest, don't open it up, leave it in its spike, meaning store it, except a little, except for a few of them, right? Which you will eat. Meaning for the next 7 years, farm as you regularly would farm, but don't consume everything that you harvest. Majority of it store and some of it eat. Meaning basically ration yourself for the next 7 years. Okay. After that, why? Why should you ration yourself? Because after that, 7 difficult years will come, years of drought, where there will be no rain. You won't be able to farm the way you usually do. So, in that moment, when you don't have rain, what will you do? The food that you stored, you will be able to eat for the next 7 years. So now, after 14 years, what happens? Then there will come a year in which people will be given rain. Allah will give them regular, abundant rain, in which they will press olives and grapes, meaning it's a symbolism to the fact that you'll go back to normal life, right? So for 7 years, prepare yourself for the drought. And when the drought hits, because you prepared yourself, you'll be able to survive. And then after that, the rain will come and you'll be able to go back to normal. So basically, he gave them a vision for the next 15 years, an economic plan, you can say. So his dream was so precise, right? So when this man goes back to the king and tells him exactly that for 7 years do this, for 7 years do that, then on the 15th year this will happen, the king is amazed, right? He's like, bring him to me. Basically, he wants him by his side, right? Because all of his advisors failed to interpret his dream, and this man from prison is now interpreting the dream, not just interpreting it, but giving him a plan on how to survive. So the messenger comes to Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam from the king and says, basically, the king wants you. In other words, you're free. You're free. However, the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, he just doesn't want to come out free. He wants to make sure his name is cleared. Because if he comes out of prison just like that, what's going to happen? Eventually, word will spread that, oh, that servant boy that was in prison came out of jail and he's with the king. How can the king take this boy? Don't you know his history? He tried to seduce a woman. He's not safe to be around, right? He's not a good person. He's actually an evil person. He's actually guilty. He's been in prison. He only got out because of a king's favor, not because he's innocent. So to make sure his name is completely cleared, what does he do? He says, go back to your master, meaning go back to your king, and ask him, what is the case of the woman who cut their hands? Meaning, tell the king to investigate, tell the king to ask, what happened to those women who cut their hands? Indeed, my Lord is knowing of their plan. Now, we can also imagine that 15 years went by. Perhaps, as some of the scholars have said, that perhaps some of the women, they're also feeling regret, right? They're feeling a sense of regret. You know, you have something called guilty conscience. A person sometimes does something wrong, especially against someone else. And sometimes years later, you feel that regret and you want to rectify it. You want to, if an opportunity comes up, you want to clear it between you and that person. Sometimes we feel that. So perhaps they also felt that, right? Some of the scholars have mentioned that. So when the investigation was sent out, the woman were brought forward to the king. The king asked, what was your situation when you sought to seduce Yusuf? Like what actually took place? So the woman, they replied, perfect is Allah. Hasha lillah. Allah is perfect. Allah is free from imperfections. We know about him no evil, meaning that he actually did not commit crime, right? All the women, they spoke the truth. Now the one woman that is left is the wife. And she also speaks the truth. We can there's two interpretations here. Either that she speaks the truth because all the other women who are witnesses to the situation spoke the truth, so now she has no choice. She can't lie anymore because you have a group of other women who are saying that Yusuf was actually innocent. It was actually her that sought to seduce him. So perhaps that's the reason why she spoke the truth. The other reason,
Okay, so now the king is asking to investigate, that's right?
yeah, so so Yusuf, basically a messenger came from the king to the Prophet Yusuf in prison. They said the king wants to release you. He said, before I'm released, tell the king to ask about the woman
He
who,
asked the king.
yeah, exactly. He told the messenger, go back to the king, tell the king to find out about the woman. So now the king brings the woman in front of him, including the wife, and he's asking them what actually took place. So the woman, they say that we don't know that Yusuf did any evil. Basically, they're saying that Yusuf is innocent, alayhi salatu wasalam. Now, from the woman, you have the wife that actually was the initial seducer, right? So she's in a position now where she can either continue lying or she can speak the truth. She does speak the truth here. So what I'm trying to say is, why did she now speak the truth? There could be two reasons. One could be the fact that all the women have now testified for Yusuf. They are the witnesses to the scene. So now she has no choice. She can't lie anymore because they all testified for her, against her. The other could be, and that's perhaps what we hope for. That's what we hope for. And some of the scholars have mentioned this as well, that she felt regret, as I've just mentioned, that all these years went by, I tried to seduce him, and now he's been in prison, suffering, suffering, suffering. And this has been on her mind. So perhaps at the first opportunity to rectify the situation, fix the situation, she jumps at the opportunity and she tries to fix the situation and clear the name of Yusuf. And that is what we hope. And that seems to make sense in the context of the verses that will come next. So what does she say? She says the truth has become evident. The truth is clear. It was I who sought to seduce him. She admits fault, she admits wrong. And indeed, he is of the truthful. Right? So she clears his name. So he made no attempts at a noble woman. It was her that tried a couple of times. And he shouldn't have been in prison, right? I don't know why it keeps going back here. Okay, now is a very interesting verse from the Quran, two interesting verses. And it's interesting because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't specifically mention who is saying this statement. So it's open-ended, and the scholars have said it could either be the wife or it could also be Yusuf. So let's try and understand it from both perspectives. And this is beneficial, inshallah, if you read this surah. Verse 52 and 53, specifically Allah says in the Quran, that is so he will know that I did not betray him in his absence, and that Allah does not guide the plan of the betrayers. So if we're looking at from the lens of the wife, if she said this, that means that she's saying that that is so he, meaning that is so Yusuf knows that I did not betray him. So Yusuf knows that I did not betray Yusuf in his absence, meaning that now when the moment has come for me to clear his name, I could have continued with the lie and I could have betrayed him again and put him and left him in prison, right? I could have pursued it at least, right? But she says that he should know that when the investigation came forth, I did not continue to lie. I did not betray him. I spoke the truth, right? So this is one lens that we can understand this quote from. And then the other possible understanding is that Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam is the one that's saying this. So Yusuf is saying that is so he will know. So who is he? The husband. Yeah, the husband of the wife. That is so the husband should know that I did not betray him in his absence. I did not betray the husband. I never sought to seduce his wife, right? I'm telling the truth, right? So it can be either Yusuf saying this, or it can either be the wife saying it as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not mention the speaker, so it's up to uh, the scholars to mention it. It could be either or. Either way, it does make sense, inshallah. Yeah.
So, I mean, the previous verses when I guess
Yeah,
he already kind of knew.
he kind of already knew,
Yeah,
correct.
like, kind of
Yeah.
like he-
So he's like emphasizing that he should know. Like I'm emphasizing the fact that I did not betray him. Like I just want to clarify that. I need that to be made clear, right? Yeah.
So if it's Yusuf's wife saying, sorry, because his wife saying it, because she's mentioning that she's fearful of Allah and she's asking for his forgiveness.
It shows that she regretful. Yeah.
Or she has become a Muslim.
Or not, yeah, yeah. Or I mean, well, whether Muslim or not, the fact that she's regretful, because we could assume that they could have been Muslim from before, anyways. There's nothing to say that they were Muslim versus non-Muslim, but they were regretful.
Why was Yusuf as a prison was inviting the prisoners to the Tawheed?
That doesn't necessarily because the other thing is because Yusuf went to the court of the king, and there's no mention that he told the king about Allah and so on and so forth. So it's possible that basically what I'm saying, there is no mention whether they're Muslims or non-Muslims. We can assume that they were Muslims because he lived in their household for all these years as well. Right?
Also don't know in the whole seerah of Yusuf that when was he given prophethood?
Well, actually, we last week it's mentioned that Allah spoke to him, or Allah revealed to him while he was in the well. While he was in the well. Yeah, yeah, the well. So, but regardless whether Muslim or not, but it to your point, it does show that she is regretful, that she regrets. So she's not testifying for Yusuf, basically because everyone else has come together for the truth. Now she's stuck, but she's saying it because she truly, truly, sincerely regrets what she has done. Right? Yeah. And then the next verse, whether it's Yusuf saying it or the wife saying it, they both say a very powerful statement, and it's a lesson from us as well. I do not seek to free myself from blame, for indeed the soul is ever inclined to evil, except those shown mercy by my Lord. Surely my Lord is all forgiving, most merciful. What does this verse mean? It means that basically that we aren't 100% in control. We need to ask Allah for aid. Basically, this is another way of saying La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, that there's no ability to change and there's no power to do good except by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, does that mean the soul is always inclined to evil or not? The scholars have said the soul can be divided into three inclinations, and all three are mentioned in the Quran. One is nafs amaratun bisu, the soul that is, or part of the soul that is inclined to evil, meaning shaitan whispers, right? And we all know that shaitan is always present, always whispering. But then you also have that's mentioned in the Quran, another uh, part of the soul that is a nafs al mutmainna, the righteous soul, and that is when you get the inclination to do good. And then you have a nafs al lawama, that is the part of the soul that kind of blames, reproaches, meaning why did I do this? Why did I not do that? That could be either or. So when you do something positive, right, the evil side makes you think, oh, why are you doing so much effort to do something good? Just let it go, right? You don't have to do so much good, just relax. But at the same time, when you do something wrong, that reproach inside you is saying, oh, why are you doing something wrong? You could be a better person, you could do better, you could do more, right? So we're always in this juggling state, right, where you have this inclination to do wrong from the whispers of shaitan, but we also have the inclination to do right. And then you have this third, category, you can say, that's always in our minds, double checking. Oh, you could have done this, or you shouldn't have done this, you could have done that, you shouldn't have done that, so on and so forth. So over here, he's mentioning specifically that part of the soul that entices towards evil, not that the entire soul is always inclined to evil, right? So that's very important to understand. And that's why we understand verses in light of other verses, right? The soul is mentioned in other verses, the different qualities that's there. But the idea here is that at the end of the day, we need Allah's help and His aid to stay away from wrong, right? So I'm not saying it's me that's in control, that I am either staying away from sin or I am doing good. Rather, it's from Allah. Yeah.
Yeah, just by looking at the second statement, it seems like if it is coming from the wife, most likely because
Yeah.
why would he say, "I do not seek to free myself from blame"? And if it is coming from the wife, then that means that in those 15 years or 14 years while he was a jail, she may have a
Regretted.
change of
Yeah.
heart, or she may
Yeah,
have
so
accepted.
based on that argument exactly is why the scholars they say that perhaps we have good reason to believe the wife actually repented and she regretted and she actually turned for the better. That exact argument is used. However, it could also be from Yusuf because at the end of the day, he's seen to be his name, right? So this statement will be in that context that I do not seek to free myself from blame, meaning that it's not, I'm not doing this just to free myself, just to clear my name, but I'm trying to remind everyone that at the end of the day, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that's in control. I could have fallen into evil because last week, remember, we mentioned when the wife sought to seduce him, Allah specifically says that she desired him and he desired her as well. So perhaps this is in reference to that, right? So it's not me that controlled myself, that stopped myself, but rather it was Allah that helped me. So it could be either or. So inshallah, next time we read Surah Yusuf, we can try and look at it from both lenses, inshallah. Okay, now moving on. What does the king do after his name is officially clear? He is now put into a very high position in the uh, for the cabinet of the king, you can say, right? The court of the king. The king said, "Bring him to me. I will appoint him exclusively for myself," meaning he'll be my most trusted servant. That's how elevated his position was. And when he spoke to him, he said, "Indeed, you are today established in position and trusted," right? So he's basically number two, we can surmise. Yusuf specifically said he wants to be appointed over the storehouses of the land because he's the one that saw the dream for the economic plan that he gave. So he wants to be in control of that. He wants to make sure that I interpret it, I give you a vision. I want to make sure that vision gets carried out the way it should be. And he says, I am a very knowledgeable guardian, meaning I'm very knowledgeable about this affair, and I'm a guardian, meaning I'll protect the storehouses. I'll make sure that the amount of food that needs to go out will go out, and the amount of food that needs to be stored will be stored. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and like that, we establish Yusuf in the land. So after all of this, ups and down, up and down, up and down, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, throughout after all these trials, we have established Yusuf in the land to settle therein wherever he will. At this point, he's in control. He can stay in a palace, he can stay in a hut, he can stay wherever he wants. He basically rules. He's number two, right? Basically the second in command next to the king. We touch with our mercy whom we will. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, after all those trials, there was still mercy there. Allah's mercy enveloped the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. And there's a reminder for us too, even in the moments of difficulty, there's always the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala present around us. Sometimes we fail to recognize it, but His mercy is always there, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we do not allow the reward of those who do good to be lost. Meaning that during the times of hardship, the fact that you stayed connected with Allah, the fact that you continue to put your trust in Allah, Allah is not going to let that waste. You may realize it tomorrow, or you may realize it years down the line, as we see with the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. And then Allah reminds the Prophet Yusuf and the Prophet Muhammad, who this is being revealed to, and all of us, that the reward of the hereafter is far better for those who are faithful and are mindful of Allah. Meaning that if you get success after challenges in this dunya, then don't get overwhelmed. Don't get so caught up to it that now you don't need Allah anymore. No, you still need Allah because the reward of the hereafter is better. Or if you don't get right that position in this dunya, that you're just struggling and struggling and struggling and struggling, and then you leave the world like that, then remember that the reward of the hereafter is far better. So whether you get what you want or you reach a certain status in this dunya, don't forget about the hereafter. And if you don't get it, then also remember that the reward in the hereafter is far better, right? So that puts everything into perspective. I don't know why it keeps going back to that slide, but so now what happens? Years go by, and the way we can assume 15 years have now gone by. Fast forward 15 years, and Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam was in charge of making sure that the provisions remain stored and very few goes out to the city and the neighboring dwellings and they would eat from. And then 7 years of drought, and then finally years of goodness. Now, what had happened was the city of Egypt and around the city, people struggled, right? And there are people that need goods, they need support from the government, right? So basically, it was a policy that you can come to us, and for a very little price, the government will give you food, will give you provisions. You can bring something to trade in, but it won't be a large amount, right? So whatever little that you have, you can give a little bit to the government, and the government basically in return gives you a large amount of provisions for you to survive. So it was a good policy. So families came in to Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam in particular to trade in a little bit of what they had and in return get a lot of the provisions that was stored. From the families that hears about this is the Prophet Yaqub and his children. They're outside of the city. So Yaqub tells the children, look, I hear that the government, they have a good policy, they're helping people out. We're struggling. Why don't you go out and give the government something, and in return, you'll get provisions to you. So what happened? Yusuf's brothers, they enter into the court of the Prophet Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam. Allah says, he recognized them, but they were unaware of who he was, right? They're not gonna recognize him. They threw him in a well when he was a young boy, and now years have gone by. But he was able to recognize them, and we can either he recognized him right away, or Allah allowed or gave him revelation that these are your brothers. So when he had provided them with their supplies, they gave him something and he gave them supplies back to them. He said, bring me your brother from your father. What does this mean? It means that the scholars have said, as you know, they were doing this exchange, he asked about them. Where are you coming from? What family? And so on and so forth. The scholars, they said, we are the children of Yaqub. They're trying to build themselves up. Why? They want to guarantee that they get supplies back, right? And they're hoping that perhaps, they can earn some favor in the court of the king and they can be taken care of forever, right? So they're saying, we're the son of the noble prophet Yaqub, and so on and so forth. We had a brother, they mentioned the story, we had a brother, they lie, of course, then he got lost or he got eaten by a wolf. Sorry, we have another younger brother that's still there with our father, and we need some food, right, to support our family. So when he hears about all of this, he talks to them, yes, and then he says that make sure next time you come, right, the provisions will only last you for so long. Next time you come, bring me that brother. Come with that brother to me. If you don't come with that brother, I won't give you food, right? I want to meet this family. Some of the scholars have said that perhaps he was saying it, he worded it in a way that he's saying, I want to make sure that you're telling the truth, that you're actually the son of a prophet. Bring that other brother so I can kind of determine for myself. And in the meantime, I'll do my due investigation as well, that you are who you actually say. So he says, make sure next time you come, you bring your brother, right? Now, why does Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam do all of this? We'll mention this at the end. But one thing the scholars have said that Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, whatever he does from onwards is directed to him by Allah. Allah is telling him, tell them this, tell them that, do this, do that, because there's a larger goal. Yeah.
Do you know the restroom is?
Restroom is right here. If you right here on the right. Yeah. Right. Thank you. Yeah. So what happens now? They said that, okay, we will try to convince our father to let him come next time. We will certainly do our best. So what does Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam do? When they're about to go back, the goods that they traded to him, right? They gave him, he told the servants, put these goods back in their bag. Why? So when they see it, they will see that I am truthful, I am a good person, and they will be inclined to really, really come back. They'll come back and say, look, our father, he said to bring our brother one, but look, he whatever we traded to him, he gave it back to us. So we should definitely go back. All he's asking for us is our brother. That's it. Right? He just wants to see our brother, and he's gonna give us more food, and he's not even taking anything from us in return. Right?
I think there's a point here, sorry.
Yeah.
Because father knew when they took Yusuf by saying we're gonna take care of him, and Yusuf knew that father would be suspecting, like, why is he asking Yusuf's brother now to take care of them? They may even kill him.
Well, correct. Yeah, that's another good point. Yes, yeah.
Because
Yeah, yeah.
to encourage.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so that's another good point that she mentioned that perhaps the father will be hesitant to send the son out with them. So because he might be thinking they're lying, they're coming up with another plot. So he's saying that, look, he, this is proof, right? We have grains, we have provisions. At the same time, we have whatever we're about to trade. All of this is here with us. So this would also put perhaps the father's heart at ease as well. So they go back now to his father, and now you have round two of this situation. They're saying that, oh, our father, we have been denied further supplies, basically, unless our brother comes back with us. So send our brothers with us so that we may receive our measure, and we will definitely watch over him. So Yaqub alayhi salatu wasalam, obviously he was hurt before and he's still grieving, and he says, should I entrust you with him as I entrusted you with his brother before? Right? However, Allah is the best guardian and he is the most merciful of the merciful. So he's inclined at this point because perhaps he sees some of the proof that came his way as well, that they're not lying. So what do they do? Yeah, so when they opened their baggage, as we mentioned, they saw whatever they had. They said that, oh, our father, what more could we desire? This our merchandise is returned back to us. We will obtain supplies for our family and protect our brother and obtain an increase of a camel's load. That's an easy measurement, meaning this is easy math. All you gotta do is send our brother with us. We have our provisions. We're gonna get more provisions. It's a win-win situation. Why not? Right? Yeah.
Which brother are you referring to?
Yusuf's direct brother. As we
Oh,
mentioned last week, there was Binyamin is his name. So you have 10 brothers from one spouse, and you have two brothers, Yusuf and his brother. So for the other brothers, is their half brother. So Yaqub basically says, I am not going to send him with you until you give me an oath by Allah. Right? Last time he didn't do that. Last time he trusted him. This time he's like, you need to swear by Allah that you're not going to let him go unless you're totally overpowered. Something happens or you're attacked. Right? So they take the oath and he says, Allah is a witness to what we have said. And then he tells them, my sons, when you go back into the city, do not enter from one gate, but enter from different gates. Why does he say that? The scholars have said because they went into the city basically boasting that they're the sons of a prophet and so on and so forth. And he wants to protect them from jealousy and envy. So why walk in as one large family? Just go different gates, stay discreet, don't draw unnecessary attention to yourself. We've already suffered from hardship and difficulty. Why put yourself in the way of jealousy, envy, evil eye, and so on and so forth, right? Take your precautions. And there's a lesson there for us as well, which is pretty obvious, right? So now they come to Yusuf's presence. So while all of this trading is going on for the second time, the servants are out checking the measurements, giving them this, that, and the other. Yusuf calls his brother Binyamin to his side quietly, and he says, I am indeed your brother, right? I am Yusuf, basically. He tells him, lets him with the secret. So do not feel distressed about what they have been doing, meaning that the lie that they used to obviously harm me, that they killed me, and then they've been living this life for all this long. Don't be distressed. Everything will be made clear soon. So now what does Yusuf do? He provides them with their supplies. Along with the supplies, he takes a royal measuring cup, you can say, that belongs to the court, and he puts it in one of their bags, right? It's a very expensive sort of cup, very valuable. He puts it into the bag of Binyamin. He puts into the bag of Binyamin. So now as they're leaving, one of the messengers call out, hey, our cup is missing, right? The cup that we have is gone. You guys, you stole the cup. So what do they respond with? I mean, we didn't come here to steal. I mean, where's the cup? And they're being honest, right? We didn't steal anything. So the Yusuf alayhi salatu responds by saying, okay, if you're caught stealing, what will be the punishment? Right? What is the punishment? And basically, the rule of the land at that point was that if someone steals from another person and he gets caught, he is now enslaved to the person that he stole from for a certain amount of time, right? Depending on how much they steal and so on and so forth, how large the stealing is. So they said, yes, this is the punishment. If you find that one of us stole from you, then that person will be enslaved to your court, to you. So Allah tells us that they began searching the bags, and they found in the bag of Binyamin the cup, right? Of course, Yusuf planted it there in the first place. So he took it out and says, look, this was found in the bag of Binyamin. Apparently he stole. So what do the brothers say at this point? They now try to, if you remember, keep in mind that they came into the city, they came in front of the king and they said that we are the sons of the noble prophet and so on and so forth. They really put themselves up. And now after saying all of this, they have amongst them a apparent thief, apparently. So now it's like an embarrassment to their family, right? That we come from a lineage of prophets, our father is a prophet, and we have a thief amongst us. So what do they say? They say, oh, if he stole, right? If Binyamin stole, don't worry about it. His brother stole before. So they lie, they create a lie about Yusuf, basically saying that these two, they're not like us. We're the sons of the noble prophet. We keep up our father's name. We try to do good. These guys, our half brother here, we're not surprised that he stole because his brother was pretty bad too. He used to steal. So they made this lie up, right? Again, they're trying to protect their image at this point. Again, because they really put themselves up. So Yusuf alayhi basically said, I'm not hearing any of this. Antum sharrun makana. You're in a worse position. Right? He doesn't say anything, by the way. He just hears another lie being told about him. Allah says he kept it within himself. He stayed quiet. And he said, you're worse in position, meaning that the position that you're in right now is very difficult. You're going to have to surrender your brother. Right? So they appealed at this point, right? Oh, minister, we have a very old father. Why don't you just take one of us instead? We're willing to become slaves, right? They really, really, they're like conflicted. They're lying at one point, but at the same time, they want to keep their promise to their father. They do not want to fail their father the second time, right? So they're saying, take one of us instead. Just let Binyamin go back. How can we go back to our father like this, that we lost his second son? So Yusuf responds, Allah's refuge is sought. This is not justice. How am I going to take one of you in place of the one that actually stole? I actually have to take Binyamin. So when they lost all hope in convincing him, they started speaking to each other. And the eldest of them, he's like distraught. He's like, how can we go back to our father? So he says, especially we failed him before. How are we going to go back? What does he say? He says, I'm going to stay back too now. So he says, Binyamin is going to be a slave and I'm going to stay back. I cannot go back and face my father. I can't do this, right? I'm going to stay here until our father forgives me and he says, you can come back. Otherwise, I can't go back and face him again. He just doesn't have the heart to do this. So they're in a very, very difficult situation. And this is why the scholars have said one of the reasons why the Prophet Yusuf didn't have to do all of this planning, right? Allah specifically told him do this and do that. One of the reasons why is because to really test the brothers, because it's like for lack of better words, like the boy who cried wolf, right? In the beginning, they lied, right? And they said that our brother was Eden when he actually wasn't. They actually plotted to kill him. This time, they're trying their best to tell the truth. They're trying and they're trying, yet something's going wrong in their plans, and they're going to end up being losers in front of their father. So it's like to kind of humble them in a way, right? Is to teach them a lesson as well, and put them in a position that earlier you weren't trying to be good and you were basically you lied, right? At this time you're trying to be good and yet things are not going according to plan. So it's like a humbling lesson for them, right? The second reason why Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam is doing all of this, the scholars they say, is to fully complete the test of Yaqub. Right? Yaqub, he could have seen his son Yusuf very easily at this point. As soon as he came in power, he could have called for his family to come in. However, Allah wants Yaqub alayhi salatu wasalam to go through more times of tribulation so he can remain patient, right? So Allah can test basically the extent of his patience. How patient can he truly be? He lost his son Yusuf. He's losing his son Binyamin, and now he's losing his third son because the third son doesn't even want to come back. He's going to stay back. So his family is basically breaking apart, right? But what is his reaction? As we mentioned, hopefully we'll try to wrap up in 10 minutes. The brothers, they come back to the father and they said, your son committed theft, right? This time from the apparent, they're telling the truth. From the apparent, they're telling the truth. And they're saying we're testifying only to what we know. We could not guard against this. And they're saying, okay, don't even trust us. Ask the people of the land. Go back, our father. You don't even have to believe us. Go back to the land and speak to the people, and they'll tell you everything. They'll tell you how he tried to steal from the king. But Yaqub alayhi salatu wasalam is still suspicious of them. Obviously, he's been bit once by them, and now it's the second time. He says, your souls must have tempted you to do something. You must have come up with another plot. So I am left with nothing except, he says the same statement again, فَصَبْرٌ جَمِيلٌ, that beautiful patience, right? That's all that I have in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, he's being tested. The extent of his patience, test after test after test. I trust Allah will return them all to me. Now he still has, subhanAllah, after all of this difficulty, he still has optimism in the mercy and the hope of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that this is just trials I'm going through. I'm going to get it. I'm going to get them back from Allah. Now, this could mean either that he believes that he'll get them in the dunya, and if I don't get them in the dunya, without a doubt, I'll get them in the akhirah, right? So he has this hope in Allah. And then he turned away from them and he said, how sad I am about Yusuf. And he started breaking down. He started crying. And the Quran mentions that his eyes turned white, meaning he started losing his eyesight, almost becoming blind. And he was suppressing his anger and grief. He was so sad, he kept crying. And he said, how sad I am about Yusuf, exclaimed this. And they said that all these years went by. We can assume maybe 20, 30 plus years. He said, by Allah, you will not stop remembering Yusuf until you collapse or perish. Like, stop it already, right? Let's focus on the situation at hand. We have lost another brother. That's what the other sons are. They're pretty harsh at this point, but they're also desperate. So they're saying that, can you stop mentioning Yusuf? Right? You're going to perish at this point. You've already lost your eyesight. Yaqub said, I am not complaining to you. I am only complaining, for lack of better words, complaining, meaning I am calling out to Allah. I'm only letting Allah know about my sorrow. Only Allah can help me. I know from Allah what you do not know. As a prophet, he has an inclination that something will take place positive. He has trust. So he tells his son to go out for the third time, his sons. Go out into the city and find out about Yusuf and his brother. Ask around the city, see if you can hear anything, right? There's something there, I can feel it, right? He has an inclination. So he sends out his children for the third time into the city. So for the third time, they go back into the city. They go into the presence of Yusuf again. Now they want to ask Yusuf about Yusuf, right? And they also want to ask Yusuf about Binyamin, how he's doing, right? They're trying to gather information because their father just said, go back and search, find out, right? There's something there. So they're trying to do their best to see if they can gather information. But they can't just go to Yusuf and, I mean, they don't have the access to just walk into Yusuf's room and start speaking to him. So they went into the court asking for more provisions. That way they can they can be granted an audience in front of Yusuf. So Yusuf grants them the audience, they come in front of him, and they start the conversation again by saying that our family has been touched with hardship, difficulty. We only have a few worthless coins. We don't really have much, but please give us our supplies in full and be charitable to us. Indeed, Allah rewards the charitable. They're hoping that, remember all of the stuff that they told Yusuf before, that we're the sons of prophets, so on and so forth. Yusuf is charitable to them, gives them provisions, and this will now open the door that they mentioned that our family has been touched with hardship. They're hoping to touch the ministers from their perspective, the minister's heart. So the minister will say, oh, this is a family of a prophet that's going through hardship. Let me give them more. And then whatever information that he may know, he will divulge, right? He will speak to them and inform them. So they're trying to get this conversation going. However, at this point, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows Yusuf to basically reveal himself. And at this point, his passion couldn't hold it as well. He just couldn't. When he heard that his family is going through such difficulty and what they're just going through, Allah gives him the permission, okay, reveal yourself to them. So at that point, he stops the conversation and says, do you remember what you did to Yusuf and his brother in ignorance? Right? Meaning, what you did to Yusuf, you plotted against Yusuf. And what you did to his brother, meaning recently you just lied against him by saying that he's a stealer, he comes from a family who steals, right? So on and so forth, right? So do you remember what you did to Yusuf? As soon as he says the statement, they're like in shock, right? And the only person that could know about Yusuf is Yusuf. So they ask him, are you Yusuf? And then he finally reveals himself. He said, I am Yusuf, and this is my brother, to emphasize this point, right? Allah has truly been gracious to us. Surely whoever is mindful of Allah and patient, then certainly Allah never wastes the reward of the good doers. So at this point, even the brothers, they have been tried, right? This whole ordeal for them, even for them, has been very difficult. They thought they could win the favor of their father. Instead, that they just been hearing their father saying Yusuf, Yusuf, Yusuf. They didn't get any attention from their father. In fact, their father perhaps despised them more, right? For this, for lack of better words, right? They couldn't get the favor of their father. And then this whole ordeal that they were trying to be truthful, they're trying to be protectful, and still they lose their brother, right? And then they go back to the father, so they're not in good graces with their father. They lost their brother. One of their brother remains. They're like in shambles at this point. At this point, when they find out Yusuf is alive, Binyamin is here, the scholars I mentioned, they become extremely, extremely happy as well. They're just so relieved, right? So they say, by Allah, Allah has truly preferred you over us. They admit it. He's a prophet, and we have surely been sinful. SubhanAllah, this is the powerful line from the Prophet Yusuf after all of what they put him through, after all that they did to him. He says, لا تثريب عليكم اليوم. There is no blame on you today. There's nothing upon you today. I will not hold you to account what you have done. I will not try you. I will not punish you. I will not do anything. In fact, I will completely let it go, right? I'm not even have hold it in my heart, right? And that is the epitome of forgiveness and compassion. And that is the bar that we want to shoot for, right? Because if Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam wanted, he could have the very least, took them to court, right? Right. And at least applied the law upon them, right? Plotting to murder and so on. And we wouldn't even blame him. He's in the right, right? He's in the right to do so. However, what Allah is teaching us through Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam is ultimate goal, right? And we see similarly from all of the prophets, our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after what Quraysh did to him, the people of Makkah did to him, when he returns back to Makkah, what does he do? Nothing. He doesn't attack them, he doesn't fight them, right? So we see this theme of compassion, mercy from the prophets, and that's what we shoot for. Anyways, wrapping up the story, he says, may Allah forgive you. I hope that Allah forgives you as well. And then, as a miracle, prophetic miracle, he takes his shirt and he says, go back and put this shirt over my father's face, right? If you put this shirt over my father's face, his eyesight will come back. He will regain his sight, and then everyone come back to me. So when they left the king's court and they started heading back home, all the way back home, Yaqub, somehow Allah gives him the ability. He says, you may think I'm delusional, but I smell Yusuf, right? Now that his family has had it enough with him. Like you just keep mentioning Yusuf, 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 and now you're saying you can smell Yusuf. They're not there, right? The brothers are coming back. There's other members of his family around him, right? They're like, what are you talking about, right? Yusuf, you mention him so many times, and now you're saying that you can smell Yusuf? It's not possible. And they replied, as we wrote, you are definitely still in your old delusion. However, when the caravan finally comes back and they bring the good news, they take this shirt. It should be over Yaqub's face, typo. So he regained his sight, as Yusuf said. And then Yaqub said, did I not, after he was informed that Yusuf is alive, he said, did I not tell you that I truly know from Allah what you do not know, right? Ultimate patience, ultimate optimism too. Patience and optimism. That's like two things that are very difficult to have. Sometimes you could be patient during the times of difficulty, but you can't, it's difficult to be optimistic, right? And sometimes you could be optimistic, but then you're just foolishly optimistic, right? But subhanAllah, this is a combination of both. He's able to be patient, persevere. At the same time, he's optimistic. Something good will come out of everything. So they said, oh, our Father, pray for the forgiveness of our sins. Ask Allah to forgive us. We have been sinful. So now the Prophet Yusuf made dua for them for their forgiveness. And now Yaqub will also ask for their forgiveness. And the scholars have said that they repented from their ways and they became righteous people. There is an opinion that they became prophets. Allahu alam if that's true or not. But the very least, that they became righteous people after this, right? So now the realization of the dream, when the family enters upon the Prophet Yusuf, he received his parents and he said, enter into the city, enter into Egypt, Allah willing, in security. He raised his parents up on the throne, right? He had thrones prepared for them, obviously to honor his parents. And then they all fell before him in prostration, right? His mother, his father, and his siblings, all of them, right? So the realization of the dream, the 11 stars and the sun and the moon prostrating before him. right? So he said, my father, he comes to his father, he's the one that he narrated to him, right? He said, here's a fulfillment of my early dream. That dream I had so long time ago, my Lord has made it come true. He favored me when he released me from prison, and he brought you from the countryside, far away from here, after Shaitan. Subhanallah, this shows that he had forgiven his brothers. He didn't say, after my brothers did that. He said, after Shaitan caused a rift between me and my brothers, right? He's saying, my brothers are good people. Shaitan came and they messed with them, inclined them towards evil, right? Surely my Lord does what he wills in a subtle way. Surely he is the all-knowing, the all-wise. And then the final dua that concludes the story of Yusuf, that my Lord, you have given from the kingdom, or you have given me from the kingdom and taught me from the interpretation of events. فاطر السماوات والأرض, O creator of the heavens and the earth. أنت ولي في الدنيا والآخرة, you are my guardian in this world and the hereafter. توفني مسلما, make me die as a Muslim. وألحقني بالصالحين, and make me join the righteous. And even in this dua, there's a lesson, as we mentioned before, that we never take our iman, faith, for granted, right? We always want to continue asking Allah for guidance, and that He keep us firm upon guidance. And that's why in prayer we're constantly saying, guide us to the straight path. Guide us to the straight path. Ihdina siratal mustaqim. Yusuf, despite being a prophet, he says, cause me to die as a Muslim. Do not allow me to deviate, and make me be from the righteous. And with this, the story of Yusuf concludes in the Quran. Beyond that, there isn't much there. We can assume that afterwards they lived a good life, inshallah. That's what we assume from them. Uh, inshallah. So we conclude with that. Inshallah, next week we will continue with, I believe next up we have is Prophet Dawood Sulaiman, and hopefully we can begin with the Prophet Musa. And the Prophet Yusuf Musa is going to take another couple of weeks, inshallah. Just one note, if next week, if we can begin slightly earlier at 7:15, if that's possible, because Maghrib is going to become a little earlier, and Isha next week will be at 8:30. So it'll be better if we can start at 7:15. Basically, we'll just pray Maghrib, and right after Maghrib we'll start and try to conclude, inshallah, by 8:30. So next week, just keep in mind 7:15, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Yeah, yeah.
As far as dream interpretations, and how quick to today, how quick, falling out and